President Donald Trump continues to reassure the global community that everything remains under firm American control. However, Iran, through a singular and decisive action, has demonstrated that the reins of power in the Middle East have yet to be seized by Washington. On the morning of March 27, 2026, the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, IRGC, officially declared the total closure of the Strait of Hormuz to hostile traffic. To provide immediate proof of their regional hegemony, Tehran announced that their naval forces had intercepted and forced at least 3 massive container ships of various nationalities to execute an immediate U-turn after receiving iron-clad warnings from IRGC fast attack craft. This isn't just a naval maneuver, it is a direct challenge to the fundamental principle of freedom of navigation that the US Navy has guaranteed for nearly a century. The IRGC has gone as far as to publicly mock the American president's statements on their official outlet, SAPA News. Tehran pointedly noted that while Trump claims the strait remains an open international waterway, the reality on the water is that any vessel originating from or destined for ports belonging to allies supporting the US and Israel is facing an absolute blockade. Even the Chinese shipping titan COSCO was not immune to this new reality. 2 of its ultra-large vessels were forced to retreat after a failed attempt to transit the corridor. This underscores that Iran is no longer merely engaged in rhetoric, they are implementing a rigorous geopolitical screening mechanism. Only nations deemed friendly or neutral, specifically Russia, India, Iraq and Pakistan, are currently being granted the golden ticket of safe passage through these volatile waters. Beyond mere prohibition, Iran is transforming the Strait of Hormuz into a razor-sharp instrument of economic warfare. According to recent maritime intelligence reports from Lloyd's List, Tehran has established an informal but terrifyingly efficient toll station. Any commercial vessel wishing to avoid seizure or accidental kinetic damage must now face a staggering transit fee of up to $2 million per trip. This protection fee has effectively turned one of the world's most critical maritime choke points into a private revenue stream for the IRGC's war chest, creating a precedent that threatens the very fabric of global trade law. The most strategically significant detail, however, lies in the method of payment. Iran is demanding that these fees be settled in Chinese yuan, CNY, rather than the US dollar. This represents a double-tap strike against American interests. First, it provides Tehran with immediate liquidity to sustain its war machine under the weight of sanctions. Second, it serves as a powerful catalyst for global de-dollarization at the very gateway of the world's energy supply. Furthermore, vessels are no longer permitted to utilize the standard international shipping lanes in the center of the strait. Instead, they are being forced to navigate dangerously close to Larak Island, deep within Iranian territorial waters, to undergo direct physical inspection and escort by IRGC naval assets. The resulting 90% collapse in maritime traffic since early March has sent global oil prices into an uncontrollable upward spiral, destabilizing Western economies. Yet amidst this chaos, Iran continues to quietly export 1.6 million barrels of oil per day. This crude is flowing steadily toward independent teapot refineries in China, entities that have long demonstrated a complete disregard for Washington's secondary sanctions. By maintaining this energy lifeline to the east while choking off the west, Iran is effectively picking winners and losers in the global economy. All while the US carrier groups look on from the horizon. Iran's decision to collect transit fees in yuan, the petro-yuan, is more than just a sanctions evasion tactic. It is a direct strike at the Achilles heel of American global dominance, the petrodollar system. This is a masterpiece of strategic symbiosis. Beijing acts as the architect, providing the alternative financial infrastructure, while Tehran serves as the outpost, enforcing this new reality on the ground. For Beijing, the ultimate goal is the dismantling of the US dollar's monopoly. For decades, the greenback and the SWIFT payment system have functioned as a golden hoop, a restrictive band used by Washington to control global capital flows. By forcing the world to pay for Hormuz passage in CNY, China is achieving 3 critical milestones. First, It validates the cross-border interbank payment system, CIPS. China's alternative to SWIFT requires a real-world pressure test to gain global trust. As thousands of vessels are now forced to use CNY for Hormuz, transaction volume on CIPS is skyrocketing, transforming it from a theoretical alternative into a tangible rival to American financial hegemony. Second, as oil-importing nations are forced to hoard CNY reserves just to pay transit fees, the Chinese currency is being elevated to a mandatory reserve status, shedding its label as a mere domestic currency. Finally, if the yuan becomes the new standard for energy settlement, Washington loses its one-click ability to freeze the assets of its adversaries in New York banks. For Tehran, this is a survival strategy in an asymmetrical war. Every yuan flowing into Chinese banks is immediately recycled by Iran to purchase advanced technology, weaponry, and essential goods from Beijing, creating a closed-loop economy that is entirely invisible to the US Treasury. President Trump may threaten to bomb oil rigs, but he cannot easily stop the erosion of the dollar as the world's trade flows pivot decisively toward the east. Faced with Tehran's intransigence, the White House appears to be rapidly losing its strategic patience. The Wall Street Journal has revealed that Trump is considering the deployment of an additional 10,000 ground troops to the Middle East. This force is not intended for static defense. They are expected to be positioned at strategic jump-off points for a direct kinetic strike against Iran, specifically targeting Karg Island, Tehran's oil piggy bank. Representing the administration, Secretary of State Marco Rubio has issued a message that is simultaneously conciliatory and threatening. He asserted that the strait could be reopened as early as tomorrow if Iran ceases its aggressive provocations. However, when pressed on whether the US is preparing an amphibious landing to forcibly liberate the maritime route, the White House has maintained a calculated, ambiguous silence. This is a clear sign that Trump is caught in a profound catch-22. If he fails to act, he loses control over the world's energy pulse. But if he orders a landing, the US risks sinking into a super quagmire that would make the Iraq War look like a minor skirmish. Amidst the rattling of sabers, a faint glimmer of diplomatic hope has emerged. The German foreign minister recently disclosed that the US and Iran have engaged in back-channel indirect negotiations with representatives from both sides expected to meet in Pakistan in the coming days. Trump has even characterized Iran's earlier release of 10 oil tankers as a goodwill gesture. However, seasoned observers remain deeply skeptical, suspecting this is merely a tactical pause. Iran may be using diplomacy to delay airstrikes on its infrastructure, while the US uses the talks to buy time for the heavy marine expeditionary units to arrive in the Gulf. Ultimately, if Donald Trump cannot guarantee the safety of the Strait of Hormuz, his claims of making America great again will be hollowed out by a paralyzed global economy. With 15,500 reinforcement troops currently en route, the world is holding its breath. Will Trump gamble on a bloody assault on Karg Island to flip the chessboard, or will he be forced to sit at the negotiating table and accept peace on terms meticulously drafted by Tehran? In theory, Iran claims to only block enemy ships, but the operational reality is far more complex. The flag of the vessel is now secondary to the political alignment of its ultimate owner. While a list of lucky nations has emerged, even this pass comes with strings attached. India and Pakistan might be allowed through due to urgent energy needs, but Malaysia and Thailand must navigate grueling diplomatic hurdles, and even Chinese firms sometimes find themselves paying operational adjustments. Yeah, even for Iran's friends, there is no guarantee of safety. The omnipresent threat of sea mines, skyrocketing insurance premiums, and the risk of sudden seizure make the Hormuz transit a high-stakes gamble. Tehran's message is unmistakable. They are the ones writing the rules of the game, and those rules change according to the shifting tides of the battlefield and the negotiating table. In this context, the White House's floating of a joint control mechanism for the Strait of Hormuz is being dismissed by international commentators as a delusional fantasy. A prominent Russian political scientist recently noted that Iran will never share power over its waters of blood with an entity they view as the Great Satan. This expert pointed to a bitter new reality. Instead of clinging to the dying gasps of international maritime law, nations are looking for workarounds. Turkey, for instance, has been quietly constructing the Istanbul Canal for years to bypass the Bosphorus, creating a route governed entirely by its own laws. Why struggle with the UN Convention on the Law of the Sea, UNCLOS, when you can build your own playground and set your own fees? This is the exact logic Iran is applying, and it is creating a global domino effect. If a regional power like Iran can blockade a global energy jugular and force superpowers to the table, what is to stop other maritime powers from doing the same? Analysts in Moscow have begun discussing the application of the law of the strong to their own strategic waters. The most critical flashpoint is the Northern Sea Route, NSR, the massive maritime corridor that Russia claims as its internal territory. While the West continues to demand freedom of navigation in the Arctic, despite their own sanctions against Moscow, Russia is asserting that the NSR is its private property, subject to its own tolls and icebreaker requirements. Scenarios for establishing similar iron gates in the Bering Strait or the Baltic Sea are now being openly discussed in Russian military academies. While Moscow is currently acting more cautiously than Tehran, the message being broadcast is chilling. The era of the old international legal order is over. If pushed into a corner, Russia, armed with the world's largest icebreaker fleet and unique polar military technology, could issue demands that would leave the West paralyzed. The Bering Strait, the only gateway between the Pacific and the Arctic, is becoming a new strategic choke point. As melting ice opens shorter routes between Asia and Europe, whoever controls this door holds the key to 21st century global trade. The direct proximity between Russia and the US in these waters makes the Bering Strait not just a transport route, but a potential front line for submarine surveillance and airspace control.